Okay, it says we're live, but I don't see it live yet. Hang on a second. Give me a moment. Okay. Hey guys, welcome to my Wednesday night live stream. Today, my fantastic, amazing guest is the very popular, the very fabulous Sophie York. Sophie is chatting to me on a personal capacity and is not speaking on behalf of the Navy. She's in the reserve and is not on duty. And she's, among other things, a mother, a wife, a lecturer, a lawyer, and I'm sure you can add a whole bunch of other things to that resume. Hello, Sophie.
Hi, Dia, and hello to everyone who's watching. It's really good of you to join us.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. This is so good. Well, I think we should begin with how and why you got into law. That is, like, were you super young, or did you come into it a little later in life? How did that happen? What was the inspiration for all of that?
Well, before I do that, Dia, can I congratulate you for this initiative, for doing this broadcast? This you're up to what, episode 50? Is that right?
Yes.
That's very, very impressive. I mean, it takes a lot of work to organise this and to seek people out and to formulate questions in your mind and to do a bit of research. I'm really proud of you. So,
Aww, thank you.
No, I am. Good on you.
Oh,
okay.
I didn't expect that.
No,
gosh.
But okay, so I was always attracted to law. I mean, you know, when you're growing up and you see movies like To Kill a Mockingbird and things like that, and you read
good movie.
Stories, and you read stories that, biographies and see movies and hear about things, read the paper and hear about things where justice is involved and. You learn things about yourself, like you learn that you are drawn to the cause of justice and to championing causes. And so I was involved in lots of different causes from quite a young age. And I ended up getting into law, which was a great thrill. And it was good. Did arts law. And loved it, actually. I was at New South Wales Uni and made some very good friends, and a number of them are my friends still. So
that's good.
Yeah, it's very, very special that you can have friends for so many decades, even though you end up sometimes living overseas or living interstate and doing so many different jobs, and also raising a family. One of my dear friends is living in Southeast Asia with 5 children, and I've got 4 children. So, but she's been my friend since we were at uni from age 18. So it means a lot to me, that sort of thing, that level of loyalty and interest. And I mean, she hasn't always been in Southeast Asia, only in recent years, but just keeping in contact with friends and colleagues means a lot to me. But the whole journey has been extraordinary, including being a Navy legal officer. I've enjoyed that as well. It's been very enriching, and I've been involved in important cases in the Navy. And so doing law is a great privilege. You also know that your client is putting a lot of trust in you. In recent years, I've been doing more academic and also political work, I must say. So
yes, so usually people equate, if you study law, you're automatically going to be a politician or a lawyer. Like it's either or, but that's not usually the case. But in your circumstance, how many years were you doing law until you decided you would try your hand at politics? Because you were obviously part of the Australian Christian Party, no, Australian Conservative Party.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I'm just mixing up my words.
Australian Conservatives, yeah.
Yeah, you're part of the Australian Conservatives. So were you already involved in politics prior to that, or was that your introduction into politics?
Yeah, so
Sophie? Sophie? Wait a second, guys. Sorry, everyone. She is brilliant. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm just gonna call her. She's still technically in my chat. I'm gonna call her. Sorry, everyone. It's funny though. Houston, we have a problem. Exactly right. So, the second time this has happened to me. Oh no! It's her mobile phone is switched off. Okay. Keep you entertained. What shall I do? Shall I sing? The sun will come out tomorrow, so you better hang on till tomorrow. There'll be some just thinking about. That was out of tune. Just thinking about tomorrow. There we go. Kenji, it's my boyfriend. Her phone must have died. What is wrong with the world? Come on, May. Tomorrow, tomorrow, I love ya. Come on, where is she? You're only a day away. Does Kenji know he's my boyfriend? Of course. I texted him the other day telling him. I don't know what's going on. This is so annoying. We have 13 people on. I'm going to send her the link from Facebook. You're stuck with a day that's grey and lonely. Only stick out your chin and there you are.
I did what you said to do, and it seems to be working now. Gosh,
so I started singing tomorrow. I love you.
Oh, here we are. Technical
battery
again.
That's okay. They're still there. All 14 are there. So that's exciting.
Okay. Well, I think we were talking about law and
how you got into politics.
Oh, okay. Getting into politics. Okay. Well, yeah. So it was over a decade ago, and I actually joined the Liberal Party. I mean, I'd had a lot of interest in politics my whole life. I was always following it, but I helped people with various things. But I actually joined the Liberal Party. It was over a decade ago now, from memory. And one of the first things I got involved in was trying to reform the party, because there was things like
it's a less task.
Yeah, they had unusual. I mean, I don't want to comment on their internal mechanisms, but they had unusual processes for pre-selection that meant that some members never got a vote, never ever got a vote, and so that was quite unfortunate. And anyway, they seem to have improved their internal mechanisms somewhat, allowing plebiscites and things like that. So yeah, but it was a lot of work, and it took many years, and I don't, apparently I'm told it's still not perfect, but anyway, that's
I can guarantee that to you.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you off air, but yeah, anyway, we'll move right along. But I found it interesting when we were talking on the phone earlier that you and I both came to the same conclusion regarding the Liberal Party, in that it's really not that conservative. It's sort of like, I only found out recently that they were the ones who introduced abortion into Australia. Yet we as conservatives are constantly saying, well, you know, don't vote Green, don't vote Labor because this and that. But the Liberal Party is not a real conservative party anyway. I'm sure that there are fantastic people in the Liberal Party. I've met them.
Yeah, there are very, very good people in the party.
Yeah,
look,
this is true.
This is an example. Dear, you've raised something that's very important, so I'm going to address it. this very week we've learnt that there's a bill that's being introduced, and it's co-sponsored by a record number of state parliamentarians. Now, this is less than 6 months after the state election. So the election was in March, and now we are end of July. And I mean, it's a topic that is very important. It's to do with human life, and it would basically allow abortion, late-term abortion, and so women could get an abortion for any reason up to 22 weeks, and then they could get an abortion thereafter as long as 2 doctors signed off on it. So, but the impact that it has is it's basically saying that babies who would be viable even outside the womb could be terminated. Yeah, and it does have an impact on doctors' rights of conscience and things like that. So it's a very significant bill. But what is most significant about this is that it's being put forward under a notionally conservative government with very little public consultation, and also it wasn't mentioned in the lead up to the election. So you almost feel that they sort of concealed it. I mean, this is similar to a bill that was put before the New South Wales Upper House in the last 2 years and got knocked out. So it arguably you could be quite cynical and say, well, they knocked it out early on because they wanted to save it for after the election. They wanted to safely get in. Now that's really cynical to do that, and it's also very disappointing for all those volunteers who handed out for the party, and people who donated to the party, and people who voted for the party. They vote for that party in good faith, and this is really treacherous. Actually, it's such a betrayal. Anyway, I mean, it hasn't played out, so we'll see what happens. It's going to debate next Tuesday, I believe. Tomorrow morning, by the way, there's a rally at Parliament House from 9:30. So people who think that this is really beyond the pale and not needed at all. It's just really pushing the envelope. It's complete overreach, and it sends a message that human life does not have value in our society, and that has knock-on effects which are very, very significant. It also exposes women. It actually takes away their protection. Because at the moment, if the life of the baby is in the Crimes Act, like all human life is in the Crimes Act, so people can't take a life, life is regarded as valuable. Once you send the message that life is no longer valuable, and that's what this bill will do if it's successful, that sends a very significant change of tone throughout an entire society. That society will end up being much more callous and aggressive, and possibly even cruel, because you've said the foundation is that human life has worth and it matters. It's so important what's being debated here, in my view.
No, I would completely agree. The thing is, though, that we're already there. I know that like this coming bill will further validate that, but the fact that people are fighting, like I've seen so many videos on YouTube, I know people say, well, that's not real research. The point is that I've seen the left argue that it should be fine up until the 9th month to abort the child. That's what the New York Act, that's what the New York bill basically asserts, that it's okay to do. The woman can change her mind based on stress. Just, kill that baby. It doesn't even matter. So we've long been there already.
It's actually really throwing women under a bus as well, because many women in certain situations are pressured to abort their babies, and it's actually quite unfair. You've almost removed a reason that they could give to keep their babies. You're actually taking it off them.
Who is pressuring them? Sorry, in this scenario that you're putting forward.
Yeah, it can be different in every situation. It can be, even a partner or a workplace or any scenario. I mean, sometimes it's immediate family that's pressuring them, and it's very sad. But when it's in the Crimes Act to do it, to procure an abortion, a late-term abortion, they can point to that and say, actually, I have to keep the baby under the law. This removes that. It really knocks it out from under them. They will be able to be coerced. There will be no protection for them, for women. And this is very, very significant.
I think you're giving women too much credit. I think many women go in wanting an abortion just because they want it. I know that I'm generalizing. Of course I am. I know that what I'm saying is not like factual in that I personally know women like that. But from what I see, like so many women are like, oh, it wasn't a human. It wasn't a human. I can just conceive another one. Like it's that easy. Some women are so careless.
It might be good. I'm thinking perhaps if you interviewed further down the track some of the NRL, the girlfriends of some of the rugby league players who were, it was basically hush for crush money. They were given money and told to just terminate the baby and make it all go away, and they signed contracts. Now, I really think, and I've met a couple of those girls, and they really felt cornered. I mean, this is very significant what's going on here.
They chose to abort their babies because they wanted more money?
No, they were offered money to keep quiet about it, but also to pay for the surgical procedure.
Oh, I'm happy to talk that. If you can hook me up to one of those girls, I would gladly do that interview.
In touch with them. Yeah. I mean, it's really. I mean, one of them in particular, I have a great deal of respect for her because she now campaigns to save other babies. She unfortunately terminated her own baby and has really learnt a lot from that process and has to live with it. But I take my hat off to her because she now campaigns very hard to save babies' lives, but also to back women, to support women so that they're not put in this disrespectful situation.
Yeah, well, I agree with you regarding the overall picture, of course. I just think some women don't care, and sometimes the man wants the baby, but the woman, I know I can name 4 men off the top of my head. I know it's all anecdotal. I don't have stats to state, but I know 4 men who had babies terminated on them, and then they found out later and got really angry about it, and the women just moved on. Like, that is pretty vile.
Yeah, dear, I am aware of those cases examples of those cases,
and it is absolutely woman hating. I don't mean to.
No, it is very tragic because it does take a man and a woman to produce a child. I mean, it's basic biology tells us that, and yet ironically, men are kept out of this loop, and that's disrespectful to them as well. And we know that there are fathers, or they are fathers. They have fathered a child, and they are excluded from the entire process. Obviously, if there's a situation where the woman's in danger from that person who's fathered the child, she probably doesn't want to include them in the decision-making process. So there are always, I mean, life is complicated, but at the end of the day, the fact is that we all are protected. All our lives are protected under the law, and that little baby has its own unique DNA, which is an identification of its unique humanity. One of the identifiers, the other heartbeat and things like that. So its own blood type, its own sex, all those things. It's a separate human being, and under the law we protect every human being, even if they're little. Yeah.
I recently went to a conference last week with a friend of mine named Margaret. It was these 2 speakers. One was a Messianic Jew. It's irrelevant to what we're talking about, but basically the American speaker said that since 1976, we have aborted over 1 billion babies. I think that's what he said. And I was like, since 1976 to now, a billion is what he said, like around the world. I don't know how you calculate that, but I was like, geez, if that's true.
It sounds like an estimate based on yearly stats for different countries. Yeah.
But it made my heart sink.
It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. But
and the sad thing is that we do know that there's such a condition as post-abortion syndrome, which some women suffer from, and causes a lot of heartache for them. I don't know if you've ever read the book Giving Sorrow Words by Melinda Tankard-Reist, but
No.
she actually advertised to she advertised to Australians, please send me your stories, your abortion stories. And she distilled from those stories a number of, I guess, classic cases. They were repeat cases, classic examples. And she wrote a book, Giving Sorrow Words. And in fact, I think you should definitely interview Melinda Tankard-Reist if you haven't had the chance to.
No, I've never heard of her, but I have been trying to get Melissa or Gianna Jessen. They are abortion survivors. I would love to have.
Yep.
Do you know any of them? Yeah. Do you know any of them personally? Can you hook me up to one of them?
Let's chat offline because
yes.
I can definitely put you in touch with these people. But
for sure.
And Melinda,
realize there are abortion survivors. Sorry, keep going.
Melinda can tell you firsthand about the thousands and thousands of women who got in touch with her and poured their hearts out and said it was not as presented. It was presented as a very convenient, easy little surgical procedure that would have no ongoing sequelae, and that was false. And these women have to bear that burden for the rest of their lives. Look, there may be some people who, it's like having a mole removed or whatever. That may be the case, but there's also a lot of people who realise that it's something far more significant and that they were not adequately advised. Yeah.
That's insane. Something I hadn't planned on talking about, but I think is still relevant, is the concept of eugenics. I've noticed that it's something that the far left basically advertises, with pride. Yay, no more Down syndrome, fantastic. But I also noticed that the far right agrees. The far right is all about the best possible human specimen. And I'm not even talking about the ones who are all about Aryan white people. Like, they just don't believe that particular people should be born. But what are your feelings towards that? Because we're discussing the quality of life. We're discussing
just on the labeling, the political labeling. I tend to think that things are either right or wrong.
I agree.
Rather than, when we're speaking politics, rather than the old paradigm of left and right is actually changing dramatically. So what I discovered, because I ended up leaving the Liberal Party and joining the Australian Conservatives, was that we were attracting people who once would have been in a whole range of different parties. So we know that we drew people from 6 to 8 different parties, possibly even more, up to 10, and some had never been a political party before. So things are very, we had many people who were old Labor who now thought, look, the Labor Party, especially in its alliance with the Greens, is no longer upholding the things that matter to us. So, family, human life, freedom, a wholesome society, things like that.
I'm happy for this discussion to not do that, if you'd like. I like labels because I find them easier to identify. I'm talking about in generalizations, but just generally speaking.
Well, let's look at that, the example that you're talking about, the Down syndrome example. Well,
because Down syndrome people
obviously they are humans as well. My niece, who doesn't mind me saying this, has special needs, and she is one of the most loving, beautiful girls that you'll ever meet, and she loves having her life. And there's a certain snobbery. Yeah, she's beautiful. There's a certain snobbery that goes with this, saying that people who aren't perfect don't deserve to live. That's utterly wrong. It's morally wrong. It's so callous and just, that can't possibly be.
It's not our fault we're born well and that they're not born the same way we are. And one could argue that I have a myriad of my own
anyway. Nobody's perfect. And the message that you send is so destructive to, say, young teenage girls who feel that they always have to be perfect and because society has told them that anything less than perfect is not good enough. So you're sending a message to society at large that anything less than perfect is not going to be valued by that society, because you'll actually even kill the little babies in the womb that don't measure up to perfection. I just think that's cruel beyond belief on so many levels. And in America, Congress actually heard from people who have Down syndrome.
An actor.
Sorry?
He was an actor.
No.
The Down syndrome people speaking at Congress was an actor who was saying...
Sorry.
Okay.
Keep
going. Yeah, keep going.
Sorry, the one I listened to was actually a young lady, but there were a number of them. There were a number of them. And they said, we love life and we feel and we enjoy and we treasure things, and we have our lives, which are great. And it's, we can't all go around assessing whether other people have an adequate quality of life based on our own individual assessment of what that amounts to. So, yeah, it was very, very moving to watch it. So, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Well, let's move on to the Australian Conservatives. What happened with that? Like, how did you feel about? If that's okay, if it's okay.
No, that's fine. Look, okay. So what happened was we had Cory Bernardi, whilst Malcolm Turnbull was the Prime Minister. So just to recap briefly. Tony Abbott had won 90 seats, 55 in the 2013 federal election, which was a landslide. It was absolutely extraordinary. And he did it on a very clear platform that was communicated to the Australian public, and it included things like securing our borders and ending waste and dumping carbon tax and all those things. So the public gave him a resounding success of 90 seats, 55. In just under 2 years, he was rolled by a Malcolm Turnbull-led coup. And what happened then was we sort of started having all these policies introduced, or the conservative ones were put on the back burner, and the ETS concept came to the fore again. Carbon credit trading became something that Malcolm was championing, and so forth, under different labels. So anyway, there were a whole host of things happening, and there were a few other key issues which probably we don't have time tonight to explore, but he wasn't going to probably bring back the Republic discussion, but certainly the ETS issue was very contentious. But anyway, Cory Bernardi left the Liberal Party, and because he had his own reasons, but part of the reason was that the Prime Minister at the time, Malcolm Turnbull, was too Labor-leaning, I think. So anyway, Senator Cory Bernardi left and started his own party, and it had all the things that Conservatives really care about at the fore. So, they care about support for the family, and they wanted traditional marriage to be maintained in Australia. They thought that had served our society very well. They wanted individual responsibility to be something supported by government, but also limited government, and not a whole lot of waste in Canberra, and also respect for the voter. They wanted clarity on, and also things that were going to be done by government to be told to the people. So not to hear about, the migration compact at the last minute, and refugee compact, and all sorts of things that were sort of just not even shared with the public. And anyway, so long story short, he started this party, and it was built on solid conservative principles, and he had candidates in all the major states and Tasmania. So we had Lyle Shelton leading the ticket up in Queensland, and I was leading the ticket in New South Wales, and my running mate was Ricardo Bosey.
Whom I've had on my show.
Yeah, you have, yeah. And Kevin Bailey in Victoria, Justin Stringer in Tassie, Jonathan Crabtree over in WA and Ricky Lambert in South Australia. And Ricky, of course, was Corey's chief of staff. So it was great, and we all got on well, and we all understood that the battle that we had on our hands, and we were very. Everywhere I went, so I can speak for myself here, everywhere I travelled around New South Wales, people definitely cared about freedom of speech issues, freedom of religion, sovereignty issues, so our borders, but also encroachment by China and things like that. They also cared about immigration levels. So these were all, and parental rights. And also they were concerned that because of same-sex marriage, that there was going to be this bringing in of an agenda which was, to do with transgenderism and removing gender from official documents like birth certificates and affecting all sorts of things like women's sport and also children's sense of self. So would they feel confident knowing I'm a girl or I'm a boy and not feel that was blurred or in question? And anyway, so these were all very, very significant issues that people were concerned about, and Malcolm Turnbull, of course, ushered in same-sex marriage following a postal survey, and he did, to his credit, commission a religious freedom review, but the outcome of that, there hasn't been anything that has eventuated as a result of that review. So they received, over 16,000 submissions, and people very, very concerned about it. Australians might not be a massively church-going population, but they certainly care about freedom of religion, and they want their children educated properly, and they want them to have standards, and they want a moral framework, and they want to be able to christen them if they want and have Holy Communion, or maybe get married in a church or get confirmed, whatever they want, have a funeral in a church. They want those sacraments to be available for them, and they also want the moral framework for society. It's very clear everywhere I went. And in fact, even, and we will come back to the Australian Conservatives issue in a minute, but even...
I like the tangent. The only reason I'm allowing it. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, we've got a bit of time. All right. So look, we all ran as Senate candidates, and unfortunately we didn't get over the line, and many of the minor parties didn't get a seat. So what happened, we were running the Senate. We didn't run any lower house candidates in the in the federal parliament.
The trick is to have people in both, I think, but that's just me.
Look, that's under discussion. So what we ended up with were 2 Liberal senators. This is in New South Wales. 2 Liberal senators, 2 Labor, a Nat and a Green. Now the Nat and the Green didn't make quota, so quota was 670,000 votes. And if you added up the vote of all the combined conservative-leaning minor parties, it actually came to over 700,000 out of approximately 5 million New South Wales Senate votes. I saw what
Grace Manning posted on that. Yeah.
Very significant, very significant. So that means that the public are actually, they do have conservative-leaning political tendencies.
Good.
They do support, they do support, they understand what Conservatives are about. That was a very powerful figure to know about. Unfortunately, because it's scattered across these 10 or 11 minor parties, it will not yield a Senate seat. So the trick is actually, the challenge is to get them to corral, to ensure that vote doesn't get lost, to the wind. And of course, in a preferential voting system, you can corral it. It just needs to be coordinated. So that's something that certainly should happen. So anyway, so yes, it was disappointing, and
so he sort of set up.
So what he did was he essentially wound up the party and took the name, so it's not available for our use, and that's some people I know are cross about that, and I do understand why they feel that way, and it is tempting to feel that way, but I have enormous respect for the fact that he took this very bold move to start this party. And what he did was he actually nailed the Conservative colours to a mast. So people know what they are. It smoked people out who care about Conservative principles. And wherever I've travelled, we've had a Next Steps tour since the election. Wherever we've travelled, people have said, please don't abandon us and don't abandon those principles. It's never been more important. And now that you look at what the state government is doing with this late-term abortion bill, you realise that even a notionally Conservative party that has just won an election will put forward a bill or support a bill which is not Conservative in any way, shape or form, quite the opposite. So it's really emphasised for me how important it is for us to keep a Conservative party going. So long story short, we have a lot of committed members and they want us to keep going, and we will keep going, and we're very determined. So we're not going
I'm happy to hear it.
We'll have a new name though.
Yes, well, Ricardo has been, I think, unfairly promoting the one that he wants, so that whatever it is that happens in-house, you know, he's already got like most people going, oh, the All-Australian Party.
Yeah, that's right. There's a few other names being bandied around, and it'll be put to the members to vote on and all that sort of thing, but that's all internal party stuff. But anyway, the great news is that, you know, it brought us all out into the open. We all got to meet each other. I mean, I'm grateful to Corey because we wouldn't have known about each other. We wouldn't have met each other. And, you know, some people had never joined a political party in their lives before, but they thought, no, this is so important, I'm going to join. And that's just wonderful. So that's how I feel about it. And, you know, people will have different views, and I'm looking at the silver lining of it. Definitely.
Yeah, no, that's really, really fantastic. It brings a lot of, it makes us feel more united to know that that was the result, or that's what you see in what occurred.
Yes.
So that's extremely,
yeah.
What's the word? That's just good.
Heartening.
Yeah, it's heartening, not just heartening, but heartening. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So do you feel like, well, what were your thoughts on Fraser Anning and how he was treated by the media? Do you feel like he is what they
look, I saw that egg episode. I don't think you can ever condone. Yeah, look, you can't condone people attacking other people, whether it's with food or implements or anything. I mean, it's just, that's really beyond the pale. If someone puts themselves out into the public sphere, that takes a lot of courage. And they need to feel safe doing it, because otherwise we cannot draw from a wide range of representatives if you know, made people fear for their safety. It also means that, you know, I mean, yes, he's a big bloke, so he'll be okay, but not everyone has that same physique. And also once you start with some foodstuffs, you know, where does it end? So I was very happy that Astrolabe, who headbutted Tony Abbott, I'm glad he faced court. And I'm glad that the girl, Amber, whatever her name was, that threw an egg, I think she missed, threw an egg at the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison.
She failed.
I'm glad he faced court as well, and was convicted. So I think that it's very important that we keep a civil society and a safe society, because there are countries in the world where it just degenerates into violence, and very rapidly as well. I mean, you only have to look at what's happened in Venezuela, but there are plenty of other countries as well where they just deteriorate very quickly. So you have to nip those attempts in the bud. People are entitled to debate ideas. We're not a one-party state in Australia. We have multiple parties, therefore there will be different views aired. And the way you do it, the proper way you do it, is to debate the issues that have been raised. You don't start throwing things at people and putting their safety in jeopardy.
You don't think but you don't believe him to be a party of, you know, white supremacists and that kind of stuff. Did you buy that media narrative?
I don't know enough about his party to comment. I don't know the members and things like that.
He said at the meeting in Moorabbin that we have an ally in Israel, so a white.
Yeah, I've never been to his party meetings, so
I
can't comment.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Okay.
All right, well, let's move on to
sorry, go on. But we conservatives, true conservatives, back a free society, and often ideas that are aired sound grating at the time, or they sound offensive at the time, or they sound jarring at the time. And before you know it, in a few years' time, a lot more information has come to light. And so it's not as jarring. So I'm not commenting on anything he's said or done, and arguably the timing of some of the things he's said and done, wouldn't have been my choice. But I do think it's so important to keep a free society where people feel that the full range of ideas can be discussed, can be debated. I think it would be quite shocking if we ever got to the stage where there's only one viewpoint that you're allowed to hold on any of the issues, and people will be punished or have their reputations ruined or their livelihoods taken from them or any of those things. I think that would be the end of a free society. We've seen that throughout history. Sorry?
That's what you and I and everyone else in our own small way is trying to prevent.
Yes, correct. And that's why I think it's worth fighting for. I think our party is very much about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and parental rights and freedom of enterprise, private property rights. But all those things, all those freedoms are so important to have a happy, flourishing society. The moment you start saying, well, we'll just get rid of that, we'll just get rid of that, we'll just get rid of that, you've actually given up what made your country so wonderful, what made it flourish, what made it prosperous, what made it a joy to live in. So, yeah.
Well, a lot of our rights, I don't think people realise how slowly, so many of our rights have slowly been taken away. And maybe not taken away, maybe that's the wrong wording, but when the massacre happened in Christchurch, we here in Australia then lost our ability to access certain websites because the ISPs were blocked by like BitChute and 4chan and 8chan and all these websites, all these usually easily accessible sites became more difficult for us. So whatever happened over there trickled into Australia. That's a form of being confined. Like that's a form of being.
What's also disturbing is that he was categorised as something. So as far as I'm aware, he was an eco-fascist. So
yes, he was. He was an eco-fascist. Correct.
Absolutely, an environmental extremist.
Yeah.
And he thought that that the Muslims had large families, and that was polluting and not good for the environment. And so he came from not a I don't think he had a particular faith of any description. I don't think it was.
Say he did, and he blamed
environmentalists.
They blamed Blair Cottrell and a guy from Austria who's dating Brittany Pettibone. I forgot his name. They blamed some Austrian guy, and they basically, this man apparently, because of the ties he had with who he had donated to, that made people like Candace Owens, who was a Martin Sellner. Thank you, chat. Martin Sellner. Yeah, have you heard those names?
I don't follow it closely enough to. Candace Owens, yes, but not the others that you mentioned. But so I think people have to be very clear that he was an extreme environmentalist, and yet that sort of was quite. I felt that was not made clear when people were describing him. They were very quick to assess his politics as the other end of the extreme, actually, which I found strange. But
he was treated as a conservative.
Yeah, he's not.
Can you believe that?
He's a self-declared environmentalist, and if you to use right and left, which probably is a bit meaningless on many things now, but he was definitely so when it would, if you were to look at workers' rights and things, he would be down the extreme left-wing end of the spectrum, and when it came to the environment, the extreme left end of this political spectrum.
Well, I would agree with that, even though I know you don't like to label. I like labels.
Yeah, I just think
I
that
like my labels. Woman, female, Christian, daughter.
yeah,
Great
look,
labels.
yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with labels, except that in the political world now, there's so many issues that don't fall neatly. That the only point I meant was that they don't fall neatly into right or left.
No, you're right.
So
You're right.
yeah, so
I'm not
by all
gonna
means
debate
use
a lawyer.
labels. Yeah, no, by all means use labels, and especially if it's helpful. But yeah, just
Be accurate with them is your point.
yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Someone in the chat wants to know whether you read the manifesto. I didn't.
Oh, that would that's one of those things that we'll probably both have to die wondering about.
Yeah, I got enough information from it when Stephen Crowder sort of did a podcast about it, and I'm like, I'm not going to read it. But anyway, that's a different subject. Now, we were talking earlier off camera a little bit about women, and because I don't necessarily feel the need to boost other women, because I don't see my condition as a woman as anything that holds me back. I'm not a feminist in that regard. I'm very much an anti-feminist. If I see a man in trouble, like when I was talking to you before about abortion, I saw it more from the male perspective and the baby's perspective, as opposed to the woman's perspective. Now, that doesn't mean I don't support women, but I'm not a part of that sisterhood. I'm a part of humanity, and I want to help men and women. I don't really care to help a woman because she's a sister. I'm not going to vote for someone because we both happen to have ovaries and a fallopian tube. Like, I'm going to vote for someone based on merit. So, and then I just want to get your thoughts on women in politics, because I did release a video not that long ago that got ruffled a couple of feathers because I wrote women shouldn't be in politics. It was clickbait title, but of course women should be in politics, but I believe that there's fewer women who are exceptions to the rule who are actually good for it, because most women are, not particularly good, for lack of a better word. And the examples I used were Angela Merkel, Margaret Thatcher, Theresa May, Jacinda Ardern, what's her name, Julia Gillard, And then we have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we have Ilhan Omar, we have Penny Wong, and there's just so many bad examples. Kira Lee Smith, even Pauline Hanson are strong female characters that would be good for politics, but it's really, I can't name that many. I was trying to do a contrast video where I named a couple of women that were great in politics, and I actually couldn't find that many women. It was a struggle.
Oh dear. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. You've raised a very valid point.
Yes.
There are good. There have been, and there have been good women in politics, and there will be into the future. And you've mentioned a couple of very strong women. Now there are a few problems with sometimes with the whole pre-selection process, because you've heard of Emily's List. That they're women who are able to get it stands for early money is like yeast, and so women who are pro-abortion actually end up getting sponsored and getting backing.
Gotcha.
And women who are not, and that can be in any party actually, but tends to be more Labor Greens. But even the pre-selections in the notionally major Conservative parties, Liberal Nats, tend to pre-select a certain type of woman. And so it's very difficult to be a genuine Conservative, and there are a couple, but it's very difficult to be a genuine Conservative woman and be pre-selected into the major parties in Australia. Yeah.
Phyllis Schlafly, I forgot to mention her.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So anyway, that's the problem, and I don't support quotas. I think that
no, neither.
It's just, I think that you are actually setting women up for blame by doing that, because you're not selecting on merit. You're actually making them the token woman, And then, of course, when there's a problem, they go, oh, that's because you were the quota woman. But also you introduce something which is,
Yeah.
you
It
introduce
just sounds
something which is
bad.
not very respectful of women, whereby when people walk into the room and have the, whether it's a boardroom or whatever, they see that the woman is the quota woman or the token woman. I just think it shouldn't be. I think there are enough women who are qualified to do jobs and with enough public education and with enough good people that women should be able to get there on their own merits and not have that ignominy attached. So it does create resentment as well, where, we recently saw Christina Keneally was given a Senate position, and it shunted aside a man who was, was regarded highly, and he had no choice but step aside because of their quota system or their, favoritism or whatever you want to call it. I think it just introduces a synergy that is not helpful at all to the cause of women. Yeah.
I think it's funny how people wish so hard for this idea of equality. Equality is such a thing that everyone wants, but the equality that we're getting is forced equality. Do you know, when I go to the rallies in the city, all of the female cops are really short? And I think in my head, if one of these leftists tried to knock me out, what the hell is that little tiny woman going to do? It's just, I know that's mean, but like, she wouldn't be able to protect me, I don't feel. I mean, maybe to a degree she could. And like in Victoria, at the end of 2017, was it? The last 3 months, they were not letting in any male candidates into the Victorian police force. They were only letting in women.
That's ridiculous.
It
That's
is
ridiculous. That is political correctness gone mad, actually.
Yeah. Well, I am in the Socialist Republic.
What you meant to do is look at what the role requires and then see who can fill that. I mean, not all women are tiny, by the way. There are some women who have big builds and who are strong and would be able to fulfill the requirements. So, but it shouldn't be that they drop the requirements that they've arrived at objectively as necessary for the role. Yes, you need them. I mean, it's quite ludicrous. I mean, if you're in a building on fire and you need a strong firefighter to go in and rescue people, you're not going to it's just, if you've dropped the standards purely for political correctness reasons, that at that moment is when you're going to feel the effects of that. And that can be tragic. I mean, if they're unable to carry out someone who's overcome with smoke or get thrown someone or past someone from a window, or, I mean, it's just, it's so commonsensical to me to match up the job with the jobs, with the people who can best fulfill the requirements of the job.
God help us.
That is not to say that women. This is not to say that women never can, by the way.
No, I don't believe that. I believe that there are women, but as I said earlier, there are exceptions to the rule. Because
that's
you cannot match a woman. So say someone said, "Oh, let's get Dia in the boxing rink with Mike Tyson." He would pummel me. It's obvious that I shouldn't be there with Mike Tyson. If there a woman that can battle him, perhaps she's probably a transgender woman. But like,
we're now segueing into the whole furor over transgenderism. Because,
let's go. Let's get it.
Yeah. No, honestly, it's actually going to injure women, and it has done already. Tamika Brents had her zygoma smashed by Fallon Fox and was concussed. I mean, and we already know. It was Sharon Davies, this Olympian, who pointed out recently that there are about 2,000 males in the world right now who can beat the best all-time female sprinter, the best sprinter of all time, can be beaten by 2,000 males in the world right now. I mean, there is definitely a difference in physique. I don't think this is not being disparaging of women. This is just saying there are differences there are differences. And in sport, what we are seeing now is a number of men identifying as women who are beating women in sport, not physically beating them, although Fallon Fox did,
just beating them with gold medals.
smash Tamika Brents. But in the cycling championships, it was Rachel McKinnon that won, a trans woman, and the women who came second and third said, I mean, they feel it's not fair. And even Martina Navratilova has come out and said that she feels that this is a form of cheating and it's not fair because they are not women. They are men identifying as women, men who have had the biology of men for their whole lives and the advantages that gives to bone density and muscle formation from testosterone, a lifetime of testosterone. So we are in very strange times, But I think, dear, some people are saying, and I agree with them, that the world's gone mad. But I think the West is in a decade right now where it's gripped by a certain craziness. I don't know what the best label for it is, but I do think
we have an identity crisis.
Identity crisis, yeah. It's to my mind, it's all overreach. So to repair some of the problems of the past, people wanted to correct those problems, but now they've gone too far. So the pendulum has now gone too far. So yes, it was correct to, so for example, to offer women opportunities or to make transgender people not feel bad about themselves and so on. So
I don't want
definitely, raising the level of respect for all people is 100% appropriate, and that's what we should definitely do. But now we are getting into overreach where it's actually dangerous. So allowing men who identify as women, sometimes even for a short time and then revert back, but to say that men only have to identify as women to go into toilets, change rooms, hospital wards, prisons, sport, all those things is just wrong. We've had a number of rapes in British prisons because men have identified as women and gone into women's prisons and raped women. I mean, and the toilets and change rooms, as a woman, you're entitled, and often women take their children into the change rooms as well with them and dress them.
Yeah.
You're entitled to privacy and modesty and safety. All this is being compromised for the feelings of a few people who decide that they don't want to use disabled toilets and change rooms, or they don't want to use the men's or whatever. I mean, maybe it means in the future that there needs to be one neutral toilet and change room, and whoever wants to identify as whatever can use it. But certainly what's going on right now is just wrong, and it's dangerous, and it needs to stop, actually.
Have you been following the story about Jessica Yaniv?
Yes, that's the Vancouver Human Rights Tribunal case where
she wanted someone to, wax her balls.
Yeah, that's correct. And unfortunately,
sorry, you're so proper, and I'm so not. You're like, that's correct.
Yeah. Look, unfortunately, and some of those migrant women that have been hauled before that tribunal, a couple of them have apparently closed down their businesses. Now, the thing is that the aspects to this, one doesn't know when to start. As someone pointed out on my Facebook, you can't just march into Kentucky Fried Chicken and demand McDonald's and then sue them because they won't buy that for you. But
that's a good analogy.
The bottom line is that in any trade or profession, you can say, this is the service I offer, but I don't actually have expertise in that other one, or I don't offer that other one. I mean, even barristers, I'm at the Sydney Bar, even barristers can choose the cases that they say that they have the expertise to do. They don't have to do every single case in any field. Now, if a woman beautician does female waxing, and then she has someone come in who actually has male genitalia, she is quite within her rights to not wax those.
And it's also a different process. When a woman does it, like she has to sit a certain way. When a guy does it, he probably has to move in a completely different way because it looks different and it's designed different.
It's not within her expertise. It
No,
completely is
unless she's learnt it.
Yeah, I was going to say a different ball game, but sorry,
it's called a pun.
No, pardon the pun, but but it's really inappropriate, but it's very unfair. And the bottom line is that it's actually going to affect people in small business more than people in big corporations. So it's all very well for big corporations to be politically correct because they are actually safely, immune from a lot of these issues that face people in small business. They actually have to deal with this in a very hands-on way, and it's really unfair what's going on. And we saw it during the marriage debate with same-sex marriage, where bakers and printers and florists and photographers and so forth were all being forced to participate in an activity that, for conscience reasons, they didn't want to. They were happy to serve gay people, but they didn't want to participate in a same-sex marriage in any way, shape or form. And so anyway, Jack Phillips won that case, masterpiece. It was the bakery case where the cake decorated. Phillips went all the way to the US Supreme Court and he won. And he's being
sued again by a trans couple now.
Yeah, they are really trying to. They don't realise that in doing that, they're actually going to take away freedom of expression, freedom of speech from everybody eventually. Because once you have it happen in one circumstance, then it can be applied to other contexts as well. So they might feel chuffed that they've won in this little instance, but they will actually be ruining their own society. Again,
I know. I've been saying that for ages. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll see how it all pans out. But some people think that we're really just in a decade of craziness, and I am optimistic that we will get through this and that we will come out the other side with our freedoms intact. But we will have to fight for that. It won't happen automatically because they are being shrunk down. We're seeing it on university campuses. I mean, we're having people be sacked or no platformed simply for questioning certain things that are currently in fashion. So Peter Ridd, as you know, he questioned the catastrophic predictions being made about the Great Barrier Reef. So he sued James Cook University and he won in the federal court, which is a great result. But the problem is that other academics see when fellow academics have to go to all this trouble and have to go to court, and they just think, oh, I don't want all that nausea myself, that time and effort and money and what have you, and grief. And so people fall silent, and that's a tragedy. And Chief Justice French conducted a review into freedom of speech at universities, and he did highlight that you create a chilling effect on others, and we want our universities to explore ideas and debate ideas.
But that's the place.
Yeah, we don't grow and learn without that. Yeah,
it's the place not to do that now.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, just on Peter Ridd, he said being in court actually displayed for him how ideal the law was in comparison to the university environment, because at least in court you have two people thrashing out the case and they each get a chance to put, their best arguments and so on. And he thought, look, the science world should have that, in fact. Because at the moment you have to have the politically correct view on all sorts of issues. Otherwise you could, face silencing or be sacked and so forth. Yeah.
Exactly. Sorry, I'm just writing in the chat.
So anyway, there's lots and lots of issues, but freedom and is probably one of the most important.
You're the most passionate about freedom of speech. You feel like that would be the common denominator that will bring everything together. And you're confident, or you're hopeful that our future is maybe looking up.
Look, I I am an optimist, so I always think, look, there's enough good people fighting for it. So in the long run, you know, I mean, it was a great result that Peter Ridd won, and you know, the Queensland University students had 3 years of going through the court system, but they did win in the end. So, and look, we may get a Freedom of Religion Act. If we do, that will presumably protect freedom of religion. But how? I mean, I haven't seen the draft act, but how it's being told, you know, I've heard bits and pieces, is that it'll be sort of along the lines of the Anti-Discrimination Acts, or that religions can have an exemption and a right, and they'll be able to discriminate. They don't want a right to discriminate. They want a right to exercise their freedom of religion, which we've always had in Australia, actually, and it is a basic human right.
Yeah. Yes. Would you say that we're losing? Would you say that there are limits to free speech and limits to religion? Like, would you allow Satanism? Would you allow people to talk, you know, to be flat Earth deniers or whatever you want to call it? Like, would you like? What is your view on this? Is there a limit to it? Yes or no? Yeah. I suppose
with religion, the first step is to see what the definition of it is. Is it actually a religion, or is it a cult? So cults don't allow freedom for people to come and go. They actually exercise coercion. So some faiths where they say you will be punished if you leave, or you will be put to death if you leave. There are some faiths, extreme versions of faiths in the world that say that takes it into cult category. Sure. So it's no longer a faith if it does that. But also there are some belief systems which can cause physical harm to people. Like so obviously, you wouldn't, if Satanism was involving harming or slashing or killing or whatever, sacrificing, you know, there are examples of that in the world, then that should not be permitted, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's why we have a Crimes Act, and you know, we have laws against assault and murder and things like that. So yeah, you can't have a free-for-all. But what we've had in Australia has been a very healthy respect for our heritage religions, and that's included Judeo-Christian, but they have also allowed others to thrive here. So in countries where there is a strong Judeo-Christian heritage, you'll find that they do allow Hinduism and Buddhism and Taoism and, you know, other religions can flourish there. So
what about Islam? Is that in your view a category, because that allows female genital mutilation, that allows honor killings, and then some people say, it's actually cultural, that's not religious. But if you read the book, what are your views on Islam actually?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's there are Muslims living in Australia, and they're, you know, everyday Australians as well, and we should respect people who follow that faith and so on. But where there are extreme versions of Islam where they, you know, promote jihadism and promote female genital mutilation and promote forced marriage where children are married, then obviously those are matters that we just can't countenance. Interesting, I've just received this book, which I've only just started reading, but I don't know if you can see it, but it's How Christianity Saves Civilization.
Can you see that? That's a fantastic title for a book. I love that.
Yeah, Must Do So Again by Mike Aquilina and James Papandrea. So anyway, I've just started reading it. I'm up to page 20, but it sounds very extraordinary and good. So anyway, but you do, if it to me, it's a no-brainer. You look at those countries that have that heritage, and they are the most prosperous. They're the most peaceful. They have the best quality of life. They're the most enjoyable to live in, and they end up being a target for other people. People are on the move to those countries because they have that wonderful heritage. So in my view, you must preserve it. You must educate your population about it. And it also creates a good seedbed. Christianity creates, in particular, Judeo-Christianity creates a very good seedbed for healthy democracy, because it understands that the individual has worth, therefore the individual should be allowed to express that. So they should be able to vote. They should be able to have representatives in a multi-party system, and so forth and so forth. So it actually, in toto, provides the ingredients that create a great society. But I think to sustain it, there needs to be education of each generation about that, about the genius of Western civilization and how it's yielded up such wonderful, wonderful nations. Yeah.
So what about free speech? Does that have limitations? Like, you know how in Europe there are some countries where you can be locked up for saying that you don't believe a particular thing happened in a war. That's a thought.
Yeah, so
you should be free to believe whatever you want, whether it's right or wrong. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So freedom of speech, obviously in different countries there will be different legal parameters. But in Australia, we generally allow for freedom of speech. It's protected in the common law, but it also, but we have limits. We have limits. So we don't, if someone is using threatening language, for example, that will be prohibited in the Crimes Act, or if threatening, intimidating language and so forth. But unfortunately, we've now, got Section 18C, which relies on, someone saying that they're hurt or humiliated or intimidated or offended or whatever. And that actually creates a whole new category where any person can assert that their feelings are hurt, and it might be that they simply disagree with your political view or whatever, and you trying to defend it are put to the pressure of making out, that 18D satisfies the defence for you. But as the Queensland University students' case showed, I mean, what happened there was, as you know, those students simply went to the computer lab and wanted to use the computers at a publicly funded university, and there was no signage to say that they couldn't. And the person there said, no, they're reserved for Indigenous, based on the colour of their skin, decided that they couldn't use the computers. In the ordinary course in a civil society, it could have been dealt with so easily. I mean, she could have said, look, just use them. There's no one around that looks like they need them. I'll tap you on the shoulder if an Indigenous person enters and wants to use them. No dramas. No. Instead, she went on stress leave, and the students ended up having to face. They had to go to court in the end, and they had to prepare a defence in very short time. Apparently it had bubbled on for quite a long time before they had to have a hearing, and didn't even know what they were meant to have done wrong. They handled it with humour, and that was apparently held against them. And so, I mean, it's really quite monstrous that happened, but it did. But what I think it alerted people to is that something had changed in Australia. Of course, we've always had the people could always sue in a private suit for defamation, and so we don't have an absolute right to freedom of speech, because obviously the Crimes Act curtails it, and defamation curtails it, and but what we shouldn't have is where people's feelings can stop the work of cartoonists or writers or journalists or academics. Yeah. So, and where people are going to speak at universities and are treated rudely or even had their personal safety threatened. We've had people who've been mobbed when they've come to universities. And there's been a number of others. Quentin Van Meter, visiting doctor, was unable to even speak at the venue in the end. As far as I'm aware. And anyway, there's been a number of incidents during the marriage campaign. At Sydney Uni, just the stall for marriage had all their bowls upended and hummus smeared on them. The students did, and just things like that. Colonel Richard Kemp couldn't even speak about the Middle East because of the ruckus that ensued. So there've been a number of instances, but the effect of them is that people then feel constrained to speak up. And we've had visiting speakers also get very high bills for security. So when Lauren Southern came out here from Canada, she was given a bill that was over $60,000.
Oh, I know. I was part of it. I was
security was
the ticket at the door. Yeah.
Yeah, the security was not for her ticketed guests.
No.
She this was to pay the police for people who were not even ticketed guests. So lawbreakers who were trying to cause a ruckus,
are punished.
She was expected to fund. Yeah, I mean, they should pay the bill. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You know,
No,
fair enough if she pays for her own security, for her own ticketed guests, but not if she's having to pay for policing of lawbreakers. So yeah. Anyway, so this all plays into the picture, but
so I was just wondering whether you believed in freedom of speech as an absolute, or whether there are limitations to it.
Yeah, so there needs to be sensible limits, as
well,
you know,
I'm not
obviously.
Bomb at an airport, bomb, like that would.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense to have those limits. Yes, it does make.
I agree.
Sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a case which was the Abrams case in the US, where, and also the Schenck and the United States case, where the judge, Justice Holmes, Wendell Holmes Jr., he actually said, you know, look, freedom of speech is not it is not meant to protect the person who shouts fire in a crowded theatre and causes a stampede that causes people to die. So even, you know, and even that was many years ago now, that case. So there's, even in America, where they absolutely protect their constitutional right to freedom of speech, which we don't put into our constitution the same way that they do. We protect it in many other ways. They still recognise that there is a limit to it. So
it's a call to action.
Yeah, we also have an implied right to freedom of political discourse.
But it's implied. It should be outright.
Well, it's not specified in the Constitution. So the High Court interpreted the Constitution to find that we have that implied right. So what it is, it operates as a bar just to keep the government from preventing us to
but the Constitution we operate. I understand what you're saying. The Constitution we operate on is not the annotated original Constitution. The annotated original Constitution gives us a lot more power. The Constitution we are functioning on right now is diluted and a lot smaller.
I tell you what is a really good idea. Look, go to a library, go to the Mitchell Library, look at the original Constitution, and also have a look at Quick and Garron's notations, because they're fantastic. And in fact, they've got Quick and Garron out at Campion College in their library, because I was reading it, and it's very fascinating. And it's very fascinating if you're interested in marriage, what marriage meant when you have that term in our Constitution of 1901, because it meant between a man and a woman, one man, one woman. So years later, when there was a case, the Commonwealth and the ACT, where they said the word marriage in our Constitution includes a same-sex couple, that is not correct. That was the High Court actually drawing an interpretation of a key term into our Constitution, which it had never had. And the only way you're meant to be able to alter a key term in our Constitution is by referendum of the people, Section 128 of our Constitution. So we are in very extraordinary times when key terms of our own Constitution can be altered without going to the people. So arguably,
part of what you're known for is this same-sex marriage, is traditional marriage advocacy. That's part of what you're known for. That's part of how you became extremely well. Sorry, I forgot to touch on that. Could we just quickly touch on that?
Oh, that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah. So that's what you're known for. And I was talking to a person the other day. Actually, she happens to be trans, but she's traditional trans. And she was saying that the Bible actually doesn't talk about marriage as a contract. we in the Western, well, in the human world, this planet Earth, we look at marriage as a contract. But actually what the Bible says, not that you mentioned the Bible, you didn't, I'm mentioning it because I want to, that marriage is actually a covenant between a man and a woman. So I thought, how interesting would it be if we allowed same-sex marriages to occur and they could have that and they had the contract. But we, as straight people, had the exclusivity of a covenant.
Yes, that did come up a number of times. So what happened? I'll just tell you what happened. In 2015, I was asked to be the national spokeswoman for Marriage Alliance, and and that was an outfit which was to be a hub for all people who really cared about keeping marriage in Australia between a man and a woman. And it was interesting. We had a launch. So we made an ad which had an iceberg, and it had the ship of society, which looked like the Titanic, approaching same-sex marriage. And you could see on the iceberg the word same-sex marriage on the protruding bit of the iceberg. And then beneath the water were things like parental rights, children's sex education, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all those sorts of things. And so that was not visible. That was below the water. And anyway, it was an ad that we booked to be shown on a number of television stations. And at the last minute, Channel 7 and 10 pulled the ads. These ads had regular. Yeah, so it was quite shocking. And I really think that was a sentinel moment in Australia's history where we actually stopped having the freedom of speech that we had long enjoyed,
Yeah, because the no campaign, I hardly saw it, and I don't even watch TV that much. I was purposely looking for it.
Right. We're basically no platform. But interestingly, I want to just read you. I did a speech at the launch of that. And
you're so intellectual and intelligent. Anything you say, I'm going to take as gospel.
Oh, look, I just want to tell you some of the questions I asked. So I made a speech and I just asked these questions. Will this proposed change affect people's right to privacy on the issues of traditional marriage, same-sex marriage? Will it affect the rights of parents? Will it affect the rights of teachers? Will it affect the use of words? What words may or may not be used? Words like in conversation, but also on official forms or in education. So words like mother, father, wife, husband, and also asked what impact it would have on freedom. Would it affect freedom to trade, freedom of employment? All those sorts of things. Would it have an impact on freedom of religion, freedom of speech? Anyway, it's just so extraordinary that asking those questions at the launch, there was an SBS reporter there who was very unhappy that I asked those questions. But when we look at what's happened since, I mean, it's really quite extraordinary. The questions were prescient, really. I mean, I really just asked them because my outfit wanted me to get the national conversation going, but it was so no platformed, really, that arguably there was never a proper national conversation. If the matter had gone to a plebiscite or better still, a referendum, people would have been given a booklet in both sides of the debate. They also would have voted in the privacy of a ballot box, but a ballot booth. But we didn't actually get that. We had a postal survey, and it did not have all the security features that it should have had, and it was not. People weren't able to mark that form in the privacy of their own home, and they never got an information booklet telling them about both sides of the issue. So what we're having now is the fallout, in a way. I mean, it's a shame, but we're sort of all having to learn the hard way that changing something momentous, that one of the building block of our society, that's what marriage is, changing it is very momentous. Look, some countries rolled out the Safe Schools program after same-sex marriage was legalised. In Australia, they actually rolled out Safe Schools prior legalising it, and it was meant to, I guess, soften up the people, but it had a lot of people were horrified at the things that were being taught to children, everything from two virginities to, gender transitioning and interpreting normal teenage attraction as being sexual in nature. So, or even role modelling. So people look up to a role model or a mentor. They said, oh, no, you must be sexually attracted to that person if they're the same sex as you, and things like that. Really quite bizarre things, but also false, quite false and confusing to children and inappropriate. I mean, you don't have to talk about fringe adult sexual concepts to children. They don't need it. They're allowed to have their innocence. Yeah.
That's the thing that's happening in Australia at the moment. There are so many landmark cases. You have a political posting mama, Marika, what's her name? Marika Rancic with then you have Israel Folau. You have Blair Cottrell with the religious vilification. That's 3 that I can just name right now that I happen to know about. Maybe there's more. Who even knows? But those are 3.
Yeah, there's more. Yeah.
I'm sure you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But those are the 3 that have Australia.
In fact, dear, you might want to get Martin Isles from the Australian Christian Lobby on your show, because
I've already tried. I gave him my card. I met him at the Australian Christian Lobby. He said he'd come on. Martin Isles, you said you'd come on my channel. You can't take it back now. And Sophie's also agreeing.
Prior to his current role as head of ACL, he actually did a lot of work on those human rights cases. So he would know a lot about how many cases are being litigated in Australia to do with.
Text him for me, that'd be great.
Yeah, he's actually been quite remarkable when it comes to the Israel Folau case. Yeah, I mean, as you know, GoFundMe dumped the Israel Folau fundraising. Yeah. So sort of made a qualitative assessment about it, and Martin very swiftly put up a fundraising page and got to over 2 million, and he would know the final figures, but very extraordinary. So that tells me that Australians realise that freedom of religion is something very important, and also that workers, not just people on sport contracts, but all workers should be free to have their own beliefs and not be cornered or not made to feel bad about them and so on. Yeah, so it's one worth watching, the Israel Folau case, very much so.
Absolutely.
And he deserves our support. He very much deserves our support.
I'm totally
what's gone on there is quite shocking. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, we've gone over time. It's usually 8:15 to 9:15. I'm so sorry. I would love to go for a little bit longer, but I suppose you probably have other things to do, other people to talk to and stuff like that. But someone did ask a question in the chat, and I didn't want to forget it. So if you can give a quick answer to, could you ask Sophie about firearms for non-criminal citizens?
Probably on our next chat, I'll deal with that.
Okay, so we're gonna have a chat. Yay!
Thanks, dear. Look, if it helps them, I did live on a farm in my childhood, and I'm very conscious of people who have proper need to use their firearms. So, and also there's a proper need for regulation as well.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I think my guest next week is Augusto Zimmerman, but bear with me, everyone. I haven't got that confirmed yet, but either way, stay tuned next week. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Well, that would be well worth watching if it's Augusto next week.
Yeah, he's great. A brain like you, so it'll be interesting. I don't feel like I deserve the guest that I'm doing.
He's in a league of his own. He is really in a league of his own. He's quite fearless. Just extraordinary. But dear, I do want to just thank you, because what you're doing is very important, and you're actually getting a message out there, which is quite hard to get the message out otherwise. So thank you very much. And also thank you to everyone who's watched this. And even if you don't agree with what I have to say, I'd be overjoyed if you could, perhaps just think about it, mull over it. And I'm happy for people to come back to me with different perspectives. And I don't go out of my way to annoy people. I really respect all people, and my views are the product of many, many decades of reading deeply, widely, talking to thousands and thousands of people and following world events very closely. And so they're not just shallow opinions expressed here. I've really put a lot of work into what has led to these views. So thank you very much for your interest, and dear, well done. It's really good what you're doing. So keep going.
Thank you. Well,
Thank
I'd love
you.
to have you back on. We can talk more in depth about transgenderism and how it's politicized as opposed to how it should stay medical. We can talk about firearms, and I'm sure there's a bevy of other topics we can sink our teeth into. But I've really had fun.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And all of Sophie York's links are in the description box below if you guys want to check out her Facebook page and her official website. And yeah, all right. See you later.
Okay.
Guys.
Good on you. Thanks, dear.
We'll still be able to talk after if you want for a sec.